Got it, Kathy. Good.
So I would like to welcome you to this regenerative leadership call. We are very happy to have Marti Spiegelman here talking about consciousness. Her title is The Collective Individual, What Consciousness is Really All About. Marti holds a BA in biochemistry from Harvard, an MFA in graphic design from the Yale School of Arts and Architecture, and has advanced training in neurophysiology, psychology, and anthropology. And she does executive mentoring and initiation programs, Foundations of Precision Consciousness, and Shaman Lights initiation and mentoring program. She's dedicated to helping today's change makers and visionaries across all professions embody and apply timeless indigenous wisdom to the evolution of consciousness and thriving in today's world. So Marti loves to invite us into thinking about consciousness, I think, in new ways, maybe ways we have run into before and maybe ways we haven't run into it before. And would you like me to read the description of your talk, or do you want to just
yeah, that might help give people a little anchor. That's a good idea.
So the collective individual, what consciousness is really about, is the title of today's talk. Even though we see an increasing desire for new collective action in the world, our desires and dreams are coming up against unacknowledged distortions in our Western ideas of collectivity and individuality, and this is holding us back. So Marti Spiegelman joins us for a new look at this challenge by addressing the physics of consciousness itself. She'll share universal indigenous knowledge about some of the core principles of consciousness: collectivity, belonging, individual identity, and purpose, the dynamics of creative action, and offer surprising approaches to being conscious and moving forward together. So in our prep call before we started today, Marti mentioned that she loves questions. And so I just want to invite you to put in the chat any questions that pop or emerge as she's talking. And she likes it more in a conversational style than a presentational style. So I offer that. And then I will do a short promo for February 20th. Daniel's going to put together something fun for February 20th for our call. One of his ideas is he's been rereading the book Ishmael. I don't know if anybody here has read that, and he thinks that there are, maybe Daniel, you'd like to just share that before we go to Marti.
Yeah, just real briefly. So for February, we'll have a discussion about Ishmael. For those of you who've read the book, for those of you who haven't, I'll provide a little summary. But it's a really fascinating read, written in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't remember the publication date. I read it in the early 2000s, and now I'm reading it again. And it actually is probably going to have some connections to the way Marti is talking today. So in addition to the Ishmael kind of frame of how we view the world and our place in it, I'll also give an update, as I often do a couple times a year, for kind of global climate things from COP and other data points that are coming out that I'm sensing, and make some sense out of those. So that will be February.
Thank you. So without further ado, we're going to do the handoff to Marti with great gratitude for her coming and sharing her deep wisdom. Thank you. Marti, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, for that lovely introduction. That's a lot of material to cover in the little time we have. So if I wander off the beaten path, you can come get me. Basically, this started, we're here today because Kathy invited me to say something, and I said, well, what should I talk about? And I realized that what I've been thinking about recently a lot is, and I want you all to think about this too, is that there seems to be a growing desire in our world for collective action. Can't we be collective? Can we be together? But if you look in Western culture, it's not actually happening. Yeah, and we have all these ideas, we have descriptions, we have explanations, we have lists of things to do, but the actual connection isn't happening. Yeah. So what I want to talk to you about today, it's not really indigenous wisdom. It is human wisdom from our earliest cultures. I like to think of it that way. It's not other. I want to talk to you today about things humans have always known about consciousness and connectivity and being human. And we've thrown a lot of this wisdom away. We're trying to get back to it, but we've closed a certain dimensional door on ourselves. So we want to see if we can find that door and at least crack it open a little bit. So my viewpoint on this is that yes, I'm initiated on 3 or 4 continents. I've kind of lost count. And I do carry many lineages. And so what I bring forward in the world is the wisdom of these elders who have tended the consciousness of their culture. That's really what an elder is, what a so-called shaman is. They are the tenders of the culture of the people, which means they are tending the well-being of the people. So culture, well-being, collectivity, thriving. If we had a 4 or 5-sided coin, that would be it. And that's really what being conscious is. It's being part of the living system that is the universe, everything on the move to support thriving all the time. Even when something comes apart and dies, it's moving toward the next cycle of thriving. So that's just, I want you to just feel what I'm saying and not try to explain it in your head. So what we're trying to retrieve is a big sense of what it is to be here as an individual connected to the whole system without any idea, we mentioned frameworks, without any idea of frameworks yet, but just an experience. Yeah. So what I notice happening in Western culture is and I'm sure you've all seen this, so think about this a little bit. We've seen situations where people want to like make a creative team and you come together and you do something, but there's often this undercurrent of either people are still holding back a part of themselves or everyone is giving their identity to the identity of the system itself. So there's this either I'm an individual or I have to give up my individual identity to be the identity of the whole. And I might be caught between those 2 states, but we're not really finding what it is to be collective. We haven't found it yet. And so this might be one of those pokes in the brain that Kathy was mentioning earlier, but really feel into this. So what do you see in this big problem? I mean, you take a look at COP, for instance, our big climate event that was so big it was almost not one event. I had a friend who went, and I was astounded at how massive that whole situation was. But something like 7,000 events occurring in a few weeks, and that's not actually collective. There's something else going on there. It's a collection, but it is not a collective. Yeah. And they did come to an agreement, that's fine, but it's in Western consciousness, the way we process information and experience, it's a somebody wins and somebody loses. It's still that either or kind of experience of the world around us. I got this, I didn't get that. And that's not fully conscious yet. All right, now I'm going to shift gears for just a moment here. Neurologically, we process information differently in different parts of our brains. And there's one part of our brain that's very, very important to us, and it's uniquely human. And it's causing us a lot of trouble. It's not supposed to, but it is. We have, in essence, in our brains, we have two huge parts. So if you know any neurophysiology, just take what I'm saying as a metaphor and don't get caught in the details. Most of our brain is simply processing data from the world. And we're going to call that sensory data. It's incoming. And you can't stop it. It's 24/7. Even if your heart stops, your whole body and eventually your brain is receiving sensory data from the world around you. Sight, sound, temperature, taste, all of it. And it's coming into you and being processed and tagged and stored and cross-referenced and completely constant. Now, how do we function? How we function is we have some miraculous processors in that big part of our brain that put that data together in, imagine a map of action. Like, how do I get to the store, for God's sake, right? And we don't even realize we're doing this. How do I get to the store? My brain's putting together a map of action, and it sends the map into the smaller, more recent part of my brain. And that part of my brain, its job is to follow the map. That's it. So the transmission of the map goes through like a gateway in the brain into a small area of your left temporal lobe. And that gateway is open and functions beautifully if we are relaxed. And so keep that in mind, because how relaxing is the world these days? Okay, so I get my map of action, and this very brilliant, very human part of me takes the map, and its job is to follow it. Go from A to B to C, and hopefully back through B or B prime back to A, because I have to go to the store and get back again. And that's how we just biologically, how we move. That's how I often say that's how we get from the cave door to the river and back again without getting lost or eaten. Okay, so we don't have to handle the huge amount of data that we're taking in, right? We can be aware of it if we want, but don't have to handle it. We just take these maps of action. All right, now here's the point that I want to make, is that we in Western culture have ended up using awareness. It's like, I had that map, I have to be aware of the map. I have to know I'm getting some idea that I have to go this way to the river and this way back to my cave. And we in Western culture have trained ourselves over the last 2,000 years, I think, to pay attention to that map of action, getting from A to B to C. You know, are we there yet? Yeah. And that map, this is biological, this is primal. That map, it has to be, because when I lived in a cave, when we all lived in caves, we had to stay alive. So there was nothing but that map to pay attention to. Yeah. And so the map also has in it, if it's A to B to C, it has A to B or B prime. So if I get to point B and there's like a saber-toothed tiger waiting for me, there's a B prime. There's another place I can go so I don't get eaten. And I could still get to C and I could still get home again. Yeah. But this map, if you're hearing this, it is linear. Yeah. And it's only able to choose A or B. You cannot be in points B and B prime simultaneously. Well, you could, but you need a lot of training. So just think about your life, feel your life in your work situations. We cannot, the way we're using awareness, i.e. consciousness in the Western world, it is very, very difficult for us to include something different without judging it or attempting to delete it. This is my way. I need the list. What are my instructions? 7 things to do for success in 2024. We have slid into a level of consciousness where we only see 2 dimensions. We don't even see a 3rd dimension. All right. Now, again, we're dipping into a very, very deep knowledge, and I'm trying to highlight the peaks. So if anybody gets lost, just holler. Okay, so what I'm saying to you now is there is a problem in the Western world with the way we use awareness. And awareness is the key to our consciousness. It's kind of magical. It's not a thing. It's not an energy. It's a capacity to be aware. The Yaquis in central Mexico called it the magic of our being human, was the act of awareness. All right. So think for a moment about the times that you can remember in life and work, especially, or politics. It's like, yes, don't look at the headlines. It's A or B, A or B. It's very, very difficult to have A and B. Originally, we take all of it in and we don't judge it. Yeah, but when we process it to make a map of action, because we have to make a move, then a lot of details eliminated, and we get our best map and we make our move, and we hopefully get back home. And if we run into any problems that are not covered by the map, we're supposed to allow our awareness to go back to that big database to get more data, to look in more dimensions. So I'm having an argument with a colleague. It's A or B, it's me or you. Yeah. Yeah. If I'm not fully conscious, I'll get stuck there, and I won't flow my awareness back into my big database and look at the larger picture and get a download about what we're really talking about, because we're not really talking about one thing versus another. That's not full consciousness. Full consciousness includes everything. Everything. Yeah. So we're kind of stuck where we are. And one of the problems being stuck where we are, and of course I'm speaking generally, one of the problems of being stuck where we are is that this is the level where the ego operates. And so the ego, it's this close to the limbic fear circuit. And both of them have a straight shot wiring to your prefrontal cortex where we figure things out. And so we can really get stuck. We can get, we're like a ping pong ball going back and forth between 2 walls that are really close together. And we can get so self-reflective that everything becomes about us, everything becomes A or B, and there's no way to solve a problem. Not even the most brilliant list of things to do to be better will help you. That sounds pretty awful, right? All right, so, but that's really where we are. And if you can taste that just a little bit, you can also feel that the companion to this problematical situation is that we're stuck in parts of the brain that think. Prefrontal cortex is thinking. And when we are focused on thinking, reasoning and logic and putting sentences together, things like that, we are not paying any attention to sensory input. So if we're too focused on thinking, we're just in this closed system and we're not able to access incoming information, which you remember is coming in 24/7. So you're in that difficult meeting, you get stuck in that place, and you have no way of reading anybody in the room because it's all about you and your bubble. Or you see someone else in this situation, now you can understand where they're stuck. That's kind of a little blessing here. All right. So what's really
Marti,
interesting.
we have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
What's the relationship between these maps and neural pathways? Janine asked that if you want to ask for more clarification.
Well, the metaphor of the map is operating at a different scale than neural pathways. The neural pathways issue is it's a deeper part of the neurophysiology of this situation. I would say that what I'm talking about mostly includes the ways that our our limbic system gets attuned. It mostly includes our responses to things. So if we get caught in this loop that I'm describing, usually what happens is we have an emotional reactivity to something, and we're caught so tightly within ourselves, the limbic system fires and our emotional reactivity becomes primary and sets off a whole bunch of neural pathways. And we can end up confusing our emotional response to a situation with the situation. There might be a business situation where people are getting hot under the collar, and you get triggered, and all of a sudden it's a really terrible meeting when that isn't what's going on.
Can
So
you restate that sentence one more time again? Because I think that was really powerful, that neural, or that's okay. I mean,
the last one I said?
Yeah, just that concept.
Okay, I'll try to recreate it. It's not coming from my prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
So if you're, I think my example was a business meeting where people
Yes.
are getting hot under the collar, and you yourself get triggered. If you get caught in this internal loop at the ego level of consciousness, you can get so triggered, which is an emotional response, that your response to the situation becomes, in your mind, the situation.
Thank you.
And that's probably not at all what's going on. All right, so
That's great.
yes. And I also said that consciousness includes everything. If you're deleting stuff and pushing things away, you're having trouble being fully conscious. Okay, so now let's go to the topic, the collective individual. Being an individual, what does that actually mean? What is it to be you? We have, as Western people, we have a way of being ourselves, which, and I beg you to track this in the coming weeks. Really watch yourself and watch other people. Our way of being ourselves is to be very self-reflective. Is that about me? Is that not about me? Yeah. Am I attached? Am I not attached? It's kind of an epidemic in the world. And if you are hopefully at ease with yourself, thank all the gods, but watch other people. When they're very, very self-reflective, they have not yet found themselves. All right. Now, in the wisdom traditions of original human cultures, there are many ways to say this, but one of the things that is said is that if you go deep enough into yourself, you will find the universe. Yeah. In contemplative traditions, you are asked to meditate, to go into yourself. And that kind of works. The older traditions say this happens in a completely different way, not the contemplative meditation that most of us are used to. And I don't mean to offend any meditators here. This is just technical, so bear with me. If I go deeply enough into myself, the way original indigenous cultures say is, I can't find myself until I put a taproot into earth, literally, an energetic taproot. And that taproot, as I go into myself, whatever that means, that's a very general statement, isn't it? But as I try to feel myself, I'm going to need awareness that is a little bigger than my ego's awareness. If I'm only at the ego level, I'm just going to run into my inner critic, right? And I'm going to trigger my limbic fear circuit, and I'm going to get in that awful loop between my prefrontal cortex and my limbic system. And that's basically like not the place you want to be. It's very uncomfortable. We've heard of this, right? All right. So in order to find myself, I have to connect to earth first. And as I go into myself, I learn that earth is coming into me. And this is technical, by which I mean it is actual energy flowing through us. Most Western people can only imagine this, but this is actual energy on the move. It's how we be. Yeah. And what I find is, as I go into myself, but somehow I send a taproot into earth, is that earth is telling me who I am. Or there are other techniques from indigenous cultures, one of which is very common in the Americas, well, actually around the world, is you get taken into nature. And you're supposed to sit there and not think. Can you imagine sitting and not thinking, not naming anything, no explanations, no stories, no merging, no nothing? You are simply putting your awareness into your sensory experience. Yeah. And what happens if you can manage this is it's not just you taking things into your private little closet in your brain. You are also being known. It's an exchange. And I would say to you that the only way we know ourselves is to know ourselves as a literal functioning part of the big picture. That is actually how it works. Yeah. Angeles Arian, who was a marvelous mentor and teacher for many, many years, used to say that nature always reveals to us our own true nature. Yeah. So to give you an example of how difficult this is for Western people, I once had a group here of local CEOs to give them an introduction to the kind of training I offer. And I sent them out into nature to notice beauty. And that's a very good exercise to do. Just go outside and notice beauty. What is beautiful to you? What makes it beautiful? And can you identify the sensory experience of beauty? Not thinking, but the sensory experience of it. So I send them out into my forest here, and after a little while, this one guy comes back, and he looks a little shocked, and he's holding his arm out straight in front of him, and I see pinched in his fingers, he's picked this very rare tiny woodland orchid. And I decided, no, I better not punch his lights out for picking that. That wouldn't be so friendly. But he's like, and he walks up to me like this, and his eyes are just wide as can be. And he says, "This is scary." Yeah. You think about that. It's scary because we have no control over it. It's scary to us as modern humans because it is in its full expression. And it can only be what it is in that moment because of its connectivity in that moment. It can only be that unique individual because it is part of the collective. And the collective, the whole system of life is what I mean by the collective, is informing that little speech of spirit. Here is where you can grow. Here is where you be full. Here is where you will be supported. So our individuality, finding out who we are, the only way we will do that authentically is in some form of exchange, in some form of dialogue with nature or some other dimension of consciousness. Yeah. Now, I'll give you another example of a way to get to this. This is not so easy to do on your own, but there are a lot of traditions that are based in breathing exercises. And some of them are too complicated, but you can with your own breath, which is an autonomic function that you have conscious access to. Doing gentle, deep breathing, you can shift out of thinking into pure experience. And if you do it long enough and deep enough, what happens, and this might sound a little magical, but it is kind of Hogwartsian. What happens is the knowledge that you carry in your protoplasm starts to rise in awareness. And the knowledge that you carry in your protoplasm, that's so-called transcendent knowledge, because it's the knowledge of the species. It's not directly related to your immediate genetics. It is, in indigenous terms, it's an entire dimension of consciousness itself that human awareness can reach and needs to reach. From that kind of dimension, we have the capacity to be aware of the whole system, whether it's a neighborhood, a family, a business, a country, the climate. We can see the whole system and then begin to understand how the parts are operating to support the system and vice versa. But in that process, we also understand for ourselves how we are operating in the system, for the system, and how that system is supporting us in turn. So our individuality, again, can only be accessed via dialogue and exchange, and not just with people. We can't stay separate. You have to find some way to reach dimensions of reality that don't include people. We're just too small apart. Yeah. So the more I find myself, the more I find my connections into the world, into the universe. As the elders used to say in the Andes, into the land and the lineages and the stars, regions of consciousness. Yeah. Now this sounds, I hope it sounds lovely to you and reassuring in some ways, but the core of my work is how in God's name do we bring this to business and social behavior and politics and education, and this has to come to the runway. Otherwise, you know, it's like a feel-good hour and oh well. Do you know what I'm saying? We have to bring this to the runway. And so that's really the core of my work, is bringing all this to the runway to see what it looks like in our world. What does it look like for us to find ourselves and realize that ourselves, we are what needs to be expressed. We are what needs to be expressed. That is what we give out into the world. People who say, what's my purpose? My first thought is, you don't know who you are yet. Yeah. So,
Marty, what changes when somebody knows who they are in this way? And I'm going to just kind of push on why is it so important to get this to the runway? If you had a magic wand and could land this for 50% of business owners and politicians, what would be different?
oh my goodness, war would end. Racial conflict would end. Nobody would starve. We would learn from nature and redo agriculture altogether. We would preserve the waters. We would also learn, this is very important, we would learn to move with the forces of change instead of trying to keep things still. You know, the earth is in a big reset. It's in a reset. It's not about stopping it. Yeah. And it's in a reset partly because the earth does that. Of course, humans haven't helped, but we want to be in control of everything. We've been like this for 2023 years, and at least. So what changes is that we learn to take advantage of change. We stop depending on things being set. We learn to grow and evolve. Another thing that changes is instead of getting from here to there, excuse me, instead of A to B to C, instead of setting a goal and only heading to the goal, we instead become the coordinate that we inhabit. This is how the elders would say it. Imagine that you are, and you actually are, you have an energy body, and in the middle of your energy body, your physical body is manifesting. But this energy body is like a node of consciousness in the universe. And the way it gets created is flows of energy and information in the universe. The principle of flow, this is physics, as something is flowing at unpredictable moments, you'll see a whirlpool. Just go watch a little stream as whirlpools form. In the universe, it's the same principle, different scale. This flow of energy and information is happening and whirlpools form, and you might get a galaxy, you might get a planet, and in all the dimensions of the planet, you might get some water and some land, you might get some trees and some jaguars, you might get some people. We are all formed by the same physics of flow. And as that flow comes through us, it is informing us. And we find out through that flow who we are, and we are informed by something greater than we are. So we are released from depending on the ego structure, and we are in the direct experience of collectivity. There are larger forces informing us, larger forces creating everything. Humans used to be in deep relationship with literally fire and water and air and land, literally in deep relationship. Humans used to be able to read the clouds and know the weathers and know the changes coming, and they could read the lands and read the position of stars in the skies and what the sky looked like on a certain day at a certain time of night, and accurately know things. And we've thrown that all away for little instruments. Not saying that we should go back to it, but what changes is instead of coming from the ego, we become the speech of the whole big system. And the big system knows how it works. Yeah. And so we're informed as to how it works. And then we don't have to ask how to do anything anymore. We don't even have to ask questions anymore. We'll have discussions because something comes into awareness, and we'll dial down into whatever that important topic is. But when we see, and you can track this, and this might be a little harsh of me, but I really want people to track this. At the end of a meeting, how does the meeting end? Does it end with questions? Does it end with, oh yeah, that was great. It's just, how do we do this? And how do we do that? Great meeting. And everybody walks out? No. Every time you ask a how question, you are diverting yourself from the direct experience, because this is another thing that changes when the universe is actually flowing through you and you're aware of it. You're receiving information already, and your response is to the bigger system already. I mean, basically, if I had that magic wand, the world would change pretty much overnight. We'd have some cleanup to do, but it would be instantaneous.
I see.
Marty,
Yeah.
you had mentioned as we were talking about the call and how it would go that you welcome questions
Yes.
and invite questions. So I just want to call that out, for folks and I'll just say that there were 3 comments also shared in the chat, and I think folks Shimrit shared and a couple times of talking about experiences or knowledge of things that resonate with similarly to what you're talking about.
Yeah, Marianne, thank you for calling that out. I don't follow the chat while I'm talking.
No, that's that's why
yeah,
it's been pretty much
Uh,
listening and taking
yeah.
notes or musing, but I do
Mhm.
want to encourage people to ask questions as well. Like Daniel's been modeling for us. It's good.
Yeah.
So,
Um,
and Mary Ellen, you had said one that elicited some emojis, et cetera, too, as well. Eastern spiritual traditions will consider these concepts as involutionary, which is in contrast to our usual evolutionary process way of functioning. I'll be honest, I don't know if I've ever heard the word involutionary before.
I'm sure you haven't.
What does
It's really about, as Marty was saying, without the brain descriptors, it's really talking about diving deeply within yourself. And I'll paraphrase a learning to release into the world of forms that which is pure and true and knowing and beautiful. It's that process of knowing who you are in relationship to the universal and
Mhm.
recognizing you as an active participant, as a loving being, a loving, caring, functioning being. It isn't about a thought process, but it is about using your inward directed abilities to the beneficence of outward practice.
Yeah, that's very nicely said, Mary Ellen. And I think in your comment, I would say the Western idea of evolution is don't be what you are, be something else. I have to evolve this. Oh God, right?
Yes.
But no, the original human wisdom says you're here to be who you are. Yeah. So there's a principle in the Andean traditions, and the principle basically in English, it translates as germination and blossoming into states of fulfillment. And our job is to understand we each are a seed with extraordinary capacity, extraordinary, beyond your genetics. And our job, each of us, is to take care of the seed, tend the seed that we are, so we germinate and blossom into states of fulfillment, not just once, but over and over and over again. That each cycle of germination has so much extra momentum that there's more than enough energy to hop right to the next cycle and the next and the next, that we never stop. Now, the seed, has to fling its husk off. How many Western people do you know are willing to fling their husk off? But you have to fling your husk off. And then you have to send down a taproot. If you don't have a taproot, you're in trouble. I mean, even a bromeliad growing in a tree has some way of attaching itself. You got to have a taproot. Yeah. And then you send your stem up and you make leaves and flowers and fruit and more seeds for the next cycle. Now, what they say is this process is dependent on our connectivities into the world. How can a seed germinate if it's not connected? If it doesn't have soil and nutrients and water and sun and wind and all the other stuff it needs? Yeah. Now, the other thing they say is that a state of fulfillment is created through the full expression of who we are. Fulfillment is expression of your gifts, your talents, your way of being, the beauty that you are. And how do we express that out into the world? By those same connectivities. So our being, the individuals that we are, totally is our collectivity, and vice versa. And I'm going to make a jump here. If we take all that, if you can feel all that, this is how nature works. This is just it. This is it. That nobody can have an opinion about this. This is how we come into being. So what the elders will say is, if you can even feel the edges of what we're talking about, how are you assembling your reality? Are you assembling a reality that includes all of you, or only part of you? And, we could talk about business and what to do with groups and organizations and stuff like that. But my message is that for those of us who do consulting, who do mentoring and teaching, this is our work first. And every little taste in my own work with myself, every little taste I get of that for me, that's what I offer out into the world. That we have to do this first. And so collectivity isn't a proclamation from the UN. Collectivity isn't the rules of whatever at the community club down the road for me. We can get together and do collective things, but we need actual collective consciousness. Yeah, Kathy, your hand up.
Oh, you got it. Okay, good.
You're on mute, Kathy.
This whole thing about the ego level of consciousness, and when you said, well, what would change if we didn't have this, or we could get to this collective consciousness? And it raises some really interesting questions for me on our ability to recognize when the ego level of consciousness is fundamentally present in a meeting or conversation or a dynamic that we're noticing, or a pattern. And this is really, and then
well, yeah,
how do you, what's the nudge that tips things?
okay, yeah, you've touched on something really important. And what you've touched on is identity. What forms our identity? If we're stuck at the ego level, you can tell when somebody is self-referential, because everything's about them. They're in either or mode, and their ego is their identity. And the ego, biologically, in terms of the development of the species, the ego is simply supposed to be the home of your personality, your beautiful, lovable, bondable personality. That's it. It is not supposed to be the decision maker, the king of the hill, the controller, none of that. We have higher consciousness to take care of everything else. So your identity, in the Dagara tradition, they say that a human being's identity comes from two things. Half of our identity is the gift that we carry, the natural talent that we came here to express. And the other half of our identity is our belonging. What land do you belong to? What lineage do you belong to? You even belong to the way of your natural talent. Yeah, whatever that is. But you bring that into the Western world, and we're all nomads. The banks own the land. There are how many people on the planet now who cannot get to nature because they're bound in economically distressed urban settings. Yeah. So we've lost a sense of identity, and the only thing we have to fall back on is ourselves, without the core human teachings of connecting to the bigger system of life. And if I fall back on myself without the understanding that I need a taproot, I need a response from the bigger system, I'll end up in my ego structure, and I will make too many demands of it. And the limbic system will get overstressed, and we have the world that we have. Yeah. So there are a lot of huge topics that we're I think we don't have time to touch on, but that are related to this, but even things about how do you accept something that you don't agree with. Consciousness does that naturally. You know, we get into arguments that can't be solved, and we don't know the basic practice of, in the Andes, it's called harmonization, but it doesn't mean making nice. It means if there are two things like oil and water, two people, two opinions, something like that. Your job as a human is to, in full awareness, articulate the details of each, just be aware of everything about each thing and let them be. And you can only do that if your awareness is wired into the world around you. You can only do that if you have a larger experience of yourself that is not based in your ego, that includes your faults and dark secrets, and you're okay with all of it. Yeah, you have to kind of be okay with all of yourself. So, yeah.
There were a couple other additional comments, and then Mary Ellen has her virtual hand
Yeah.
up. But Shimrit shared a, folks can see the chat, shared a link there. Shimrit, I
nice.
don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to that comment that you made.
Yeah, it was it's what you were sharing, Marty, around the feeling of being that seed that sends down the taproot and how we can germinate constantly in that cycle. It just reminded me, I was in a session last week where we were asked to witness a seed growing, sending down the taproot, growing the root, and then shooting up and all of the rest. And then consider and be in dialogue with each other around what's at play here to make life emergence happen. And the immediate focus for so many of us was immediately just the seed, and it took time and more dialogue to then think about and see the soil and the air and all the other things, and how knowledge and life exists and emerge in conversation between all those things. It's not just the seed on its own. So I was just sharing that because it reminded me exactly of that conversation and that dialogue and experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that.
And then Jane mentioned Parker Palmer's question, not just who am I, but whose am I?
Oh, yes, yes. A brilliant rephrasing on Parker's part. Yes. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Love that. Thank you, Jane. And Mary Ellen, you had something.
I was thinking that the way I have understood your description of functioning in the world is it's called a provisional ego. It's what covers our collective or our consciousness. And the most descriptive, I want to find quote that I have seen is that love is essentially self-communicative. Love being with a capital L. True love is unconquerable and irresistible, and it goes on gathering power and spreading itself until eventually it transforms everyone whom it touches. And that is, as I mentioned, much more of an Eastern perspective, but does certainly incorporate many of the Western concepts.
Yeah. It's actually an Eastern concept that they got from the older traditions. So let me briefly give you guys two other principles of consciousness, because you're absolutely right.
Just a quick time check, Marty. We've got about 4 minutes left. So these two concepts, and then we'll close out.
Okay, great. We should do 2 hours next time. So
we can invite you back too.
Yeah, please. Oh, please. I would love this. So imagine that you can like step outside into nature and just put your awareness on the world around you completely. Don't think about yourself. Don't worry about, is this right or wrong? Just experience. No thinking, experience. You can even do this sitting inside, but it's easier outside. And just do that and do that and do that until you realize, oh my God, something is really different. You realize you feel present and you feel somehow lighter, yet larger, yet connected. It's a completely different experience. And if you feel deeply enough, you'll realize it has nothing to do with your ego. The elders call this a non-personal state. They don't mean impersonal. They mean most of our consciousness is beyond our ego structure. The principle for that is the principle, it's called pacha in Quechua. It means a coordinate in space-time. So when we flow our awareness into the world around us and experience that, really experience it, then we become organized by that principle, which means we are present in our coordinate. And if we stay in that state and keep experiencing, we will realize that awareness, our awareness, picks up everything. So you can't be judging and naming and thinking because it'll break the magic here. We have the capacity to be completely aware of everything as it is and not do a thing about it. In that state, they call that principle munai, which means to love. When you are completely accepting, whether you know the principles or not, you'd say, oh, that's a really loving state. It's like, oh, phew, your limbic system finally relaxes. That gateway that you need open in your brain is wide open. Pacha and munai, presence and awareness of everything as it is. Pacha and munai. In that state, if I listen to the world will say, okay, nothing's perfect, but here's what's best for you today. In that state, when I get that message and I start to focus on what's best, I get all of the information I need to do my best that day. And I don't have to fight anything or change anything or complain about anything. This is universal consciousness feeding one of its brilliant nodes. And this is love. And they actually also say that we begin to emanate love. The elders in the Andes call it, they understand it as a specific amplitude and frequency. And when we're organized by these principles, we emanate munai, and that energy heat seeks places it can connect and amplify itself. So that's another thing that would change. The world will be flooded with love. Unconditional love. And there's no 3 to-do steps to get there. This is a state of being. It cannot be described and done.
Marti, I will share this so you don't need to add anything around promotion, but one of the things Marti does is that she invites people to work with her for 4 years to get to this kind of practice of collective consciousness. And so we will put all of her detailed information when we post the recording, so you can connect with her that way. Or Marti, you could put your email in the chat if you want.
Yeah, let me do that.
But very, very fun. Thank you so much for your willingness, and we will definitely invite you back for more. So thank you.
Oh, please. I had such a wonderful time. And any of you, if you have questions that come up, just email me. Be happy to say more. Like I said, it was a very big topic to put into an hour, but I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah, beautiful. So my gratitude to all of you, and to Kathy, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness and your study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, folks. We will see
Okay.
you next week. Take care.
Okay.
Or next month, rather, on the 20th.
Next month, February 20th,
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks.
Be well.
Bye-bye.
Uh-huh.
Bye-bye.